This is unique. We have everyone on a video. Usually you have people like just hiding. Baruch Hashem. Nice to see everybody. Okay, we're up to Lamed Aleph Amid Beis. About, let's say, 12 lines up. Amash Shmuel. So we're speaking about things that on Yontif you can, they're not mamish isurim, but because of either the dechoil, nekachamemka, tircha, we stay away from doing it. So now you have, let's say, a water cistern in the ground, and you have a lid on top of it. So Amash Shmuel chaysama shebekarka. Literally the seals of something in the karka. Rashi brings like a water cistern. Matir, you're able to go ahead and untie it because it's not a keser shel kayama, because it's made to be tied and untied to go ahead and access the water that's there. So you can do that. Aval, very important. Aval loy mafkia, you can't unravel it. Loy chaytech, nor can you cut it. That would be an act of stira, guys. Since it's in the ground, it has the din of a binyan, and then it's not a kli. So since it's in the ground, there's binyan bekarka. There's a binyan in a house. So unraveling it or cutting it would be tantamount with stira, and therefore you wouldn't be able to do it. Right? Shabbos or Yontif. It says Mamish doesn't say make a chilik. Shebe kalim versus, however, if it's kalim, then matir mafkia v'chaytich. You can do anything. Ain't stira bekalim. So not only could you go ahead and untie the cover, you could even unravel it and cut it. Echad Shabbos v'echad Yontif. This din applies to Sai Yontif, Sai Shabbos. So let's go over the din. You have a din of a binyan and karka. You would be able to untie it. You would not be able to unravel or cut. If it's a kli, you can do all of them. And there's no chilik between Shabbos and Yontif. This din is a universal din between Shabbos and Yontif. Meisvei chaysam shebekarka b'Shabbos matir. On Shabbos, you can go ahead and untie. Avaloi mafkiyav leichaytich, which is consistent with what Shmuel said. On Shabbos, you can do this. You can untie, but neither unravel or cut. B'Yontif matir umafkiyav chaytich. That's the problem. Shmuel said on Yontif you can't be mafkia, you can't be chaytich, and here you have a brisa that says you could. So l'chayra, what does Shmuel do with this brisa? Shmuel can't go ahead and fence off against the brisa. So the kasha, Shmuel says on Yontif you can't. Here we say on you could, and here we say a brisa. The brisa Shmuel says you can't, and here the brisa says you could unravel and you could cut. It says who's the Tana of that brisa? Who's the Tana of that brisa? It is Reb Meir. The Tana brisa is Reb Meir. He domar af poichas lechatchila. Right. You can even go ahead and we saw yesterday you have bricks. You're able to go ahead if the peiros are behind the bricks, as long as there are not cement in them, you'll be able to take out the bricks to access the fruit. So who adin over here, you'll be able to untie, unravel, and cut on Yontif to get to what? There's no stira here either. There's no stira here either. So Shmuel said is then according to one Tana. The brisa you're bringing according to the kasher that on Shmuel says on Yontif you can't, and here the brisa says you could. That is Reb Meir, and Shmuel goes with another Tana against Reb Meir. Upligi Rabbanon Aleha, and the Rabbanon argue Reb Meir, and Shmuel is in cahoots with the Rabbanon, so therefore there's no problem why he says on Yontif you can't unravel and you can't cut. Vaynodami Kirabbanon. Fred the Gemara, okay, everything works out in terms of logistics, but what about in fact? In fact, umi pligi Rabbanon leb b'chaysam shebekarka? Do in fact the Rabbanon argue b'chaysam shebekarka, saying that what? That you can't unravel and you can't cut? Vatanya, moedim chacham Reb Meir b'chaysam shebekarka shebeshabbos matir avalei mafkia avalei chaytich b'yontif matir mafkia v'chaytich, and on Yontif you could. So back to the original question. We have a brisa that says on Yontif you're able to do anything. Untie, unravel, and cut. Says Shmuel, you can only untie, you can't unravel and cut. And you can't tell me that brisa goes according to Rabbanon, because the Reb Meir, because the Chachamim agree with Reb Meir. So Shmuel has no one that he can go according to. How can Shmuel fence off against the Rabbanon Reb Meir, saying that you cannot go ahead and unravel and cut on Yontif? Amid Aleph, Hudama Kiyaitana. Shmuel holds like the following Tana. In other words, you're right. He doesn't know like the Rabbanon. He doesn't know like Reb Meir, but he does have a Tana that goes according to him, says that it will be asa to unravel and cut on Yontif. The Tanya, Chaysama shebekarka matir, you can untie. Avalei mafkir, you can't unravel. V'loi chaytich echad Shabbos, and here's the key: the echad Yontif. Okay, so we answered that up. Shmuel has a Tana that goes according to you can't unravel, you can't uncut Yontif. The Brisa continues. Ushebekli b'Shabbos mater avaloi mafkia v'loi chaytich. But when it comes to a chaysim on a kli, not a karka, on a kli, on Shabbos you can untie but not unravel and cut. But Yontif mater mafkia v'chaytich. And on Yontif you could go ahead and untie and mafkia v'chaytich. Teratz l'cha reisha. So you answer up the reisha that Shmuel says you can't. We have a brisa that says that you can't. Very good. But now you got a problem. Why does it say in the Sefer? Why does it say in the Sefer here? Shmuel said by Kalim, even Shabbos you're able to unravel. Guys, Shmuel said by Kalim. Let's go back to Shmuel, guys. Back to where we started. Shmuel, Shebekalim, Mater Umafkia v'chaytich echad Shabbos, echad Yontif. You know what? On Yontif you could do everything. What does this brisa say? Third line down on the Amid Aleph. Ushebekli b'Shabbos matir avaloi mafkia v'loi chaytich. Here's a problem. You dealt with the issue of not being able to unravel on Yontif and not being able to cut on Yontif. Shmuel goes according to, but Shmuel would disagree with this. Shmuel said when it comes to Kalim, you can do everything. Here we said by Kalim, by Shabbos, you can't unravel. You can't be chaytich. What does Shmuel do with that? Ela seifa kasha. And for the Gemara, guys, really be'emes, guys, when it comes to stira, there is no problem. You could cut, you could unravel. It's why? Because since it's a kli, not a binyan, there is no stira. And that's what Shmuel said. The Brisa says you can't. That's a side issue. That is a muktzah problem. From the Nechemya we had in Masechta Shabbos, he held the most severe level of muktzah. Guys, you might remember this shita that you can use a kli for something. Let's say you can use a nut, a hammer to go ahead and crack a nut, right? You know, it's kli shemalachta leissa. You could use begufay. So even though you're not allowed to build on Shabbos, when it comes to a nut, you could take a cracker. Said Rabbi Nechemya, a kli can only be taken for its purpose. So you're taking a purpose. A knife is used to cut food. You can't take a knife to go ahead and cut the rope. So als the stira problem, it's not a problem. The brisa over there that said, the last brisa we said that on Shabbos, you're unable to go ahead and unravel and cut is not a stira problem. It's not a demolishing problem. When it comes to stira, the problem is you can't take a vessel, you can't take a kli to do it. It's a side issue. It's like this. Says the Gemara in the Chemyehi. The Amar, Kol HaKelim Eini Tolim Ele Derech Tashmishan. All Kelim can only be taken Derech Tashmishan. Look at Rashi, beautiful Rashi, guys. Hamani Reb Nechemyehi. We're like a fourth line when it gets small. Klema. La'olam muta lafkia v'lachtoich. You really on when it comes to a kli on Shabbos, you're able to unravel and you're able to cut. Why? The aim behem mishum stira. There's no stira. So why does the Tana say you cannot go ahead and cut or unravel? Ulahani Tana gufa im yachal lafkia linatim biyadei shari. If you be able to go ahead and untie it or with your hand, it will be fine. It's a muktzah problem, carrying the knife. You can only use it for its purpose. The sakin and the sakin is for the purpose of cutting food. It's not the cutting seals. And Shmuel disagrees with it. So very gishmak. Okay, let's see what we saw so far this evening. You have a on a piece of karka, you have a lid on top of the karka, whether it's Shabbos or Yontif, all you can do is untie it and put it back. It's not a kesher shakiyama. You can't cut it, you can't go ahead and unravel it because why? It's stira, because it's in the ground. If it's a kli, said Shmuel, then you can do anything. You can go ahead and cut it, you can unravel, you can do anything. We had a kasha, a brisa that says by Yontif you could unravel, you could cut. We said that brisa that goes according to the Rabbanon, that goes according to Reb Meir, and Shmuel went according to a brisa that has a Tana says Yontif you cannot unravel, you can't cut. In the same brisa that Shmuel that said you can't unravel uncut, it says Kalim on Shabbos you can't unravel a cut. Shmuel said Kalim on Shabbos you could. And for the Gemara, I'll tell you, it's not an issue of stira. Al stira, it's not a problem. That second brisa is Reb Nechemya, who says you can't take the knife except for its purpose. The purpose of a knife is eating, not cutting. And therefore, that brisa said not. But however, Shmuel does not hold like that dinner. He also a regular dinner muktzah. You could take a nutcracker, a hammer, or kid a nutcracker. So right now everything is great. Okay, says the Gemara. Everything's great by me. I don't know by you. Why do you say that Shabbos you can't unravel, you can cut Yontif also? Maybe there's difference. It's between what? Is it the Rabban Shabbos? Is the Rabban Yontif? Is there any difference for Tani? Chada? You have three brises. Masikim bekalim, you can go ahead and light bekalim and masikim b'shivei kalim. You can't light with shivei kalim. B'tanya yidach masikim bein bekalim bein b'shivei kalim. B'tanya yidach ein masikim loy bekalim loy b'shivei kalim. Oh, guys, both are good. Neither are good, right? Kalim are good. Broken kalim not good. Okay, kalim are not. Let's go. Kalim you could use to burn, not muktzah. Shivrei kalim you can't use because it's muktzah. That's Rabbi Yehuda, who holds the far-reaching effects of muktzah. Second brisa, you could use both. That's from Shimon. So shivrei not only can you use a kli to burn, you can use the shivrei kalim. Last brisa, you can't go ahead and do anything. That's Rabbi Nechemia, who holds that a kli can only be taken for its purpose. Let's see the Gemara. Let's see the Gemara inside. We have three. And for the Gemara, Mishani like Kasha, Rabbi Yehuda, the one that says you could use kalim and not broken kalim, that's Rabbi Yehuda, the first one. The one that says you could use both is Rabbi Shimon, because he doesn't hold the far-reaching aspects of Muktzah. Rabbi Nechemia. So you see Rabbi Nechemia by the Rabbanan does not make a distinction between what? Between Shabbos and Yontif. So how can you go ahead and say here he does? So there's two Tanoim, according to one Tana, what? He doesn't make a distinction. That's the last brisa. According to the first brisa, he makes a distinction. Shabbos not. Shabbos you can't unravel. Shabbos you can't cut using a knife. On the other hand, when it comes to a din d'Rabbanan, you would be able to use a knife, despite the fact it's not for food, it's for cutting. That would be there. Okay, now you have a clump of clay, and you go ahead and you take your hands. In the process of making any kli, you have to do two things. You have to knead it. That's one thing. You have to make a receptacle areas too. And then you have to put it in the kiln to go ahead and be mitzaref it that what it's able to contain things without being porous. Good. So a kli is not makabel tuma until it's gemar malacha. The question is, at which point in time is the gemar malacha? Says the Mishnah, ein poichasin es haner mifnei shu oisa kli. You can't go ahead and hollow out a ner because you're making a kli. Even if you're not putting it in the kiln, even if you're not going ahead and founding it, nonetheless, you would not be able to do this. You can't make charcoal on Yontif. And the third din, nor can you go ahead and cut a wick. Because in all these places, you're making a kli. Fellas, and there, obviously, you're making a kli by making an indentation where it can contain oil. Pchamim, you're making a kli that was used by goldsmith. The smiths would use the charcoal, so you're making a kli. And a psila, if you cut in half, you're creating a wick, so you're making a kli. If you cut it in half, you're creating a kli. So all these are also because you're creating a kli. Says the Rabbi Yehuda, you can cut it using fire. If you don't cut it with cut it with a fire, and we'll see with the Gemara how Gemara is designed that case. Says the Gemara, Man tana de psichas ner manahu. Who's the Tana that says the hollowing out of a ner before it goes into the kiln is considered a kli? Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Meir, it's the Tana Rabbi Meir. The Tanya, klicheres me'emasai mekabel tuma. At which point in time is the klicheres considered complete to mekabel tuma? Mishenigmer malachtoi, div Rabbi Meir. When the malach is finished, even before it goes into the kiln. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, mishit sarfu bekivshom, and it goes into the kiln, a later point. So our Mishnah, which considered it what? A kli at an earlier point, is Reb Meir. It wasn't put in the kiln yet. So it must be according to Reb Meir, not Reb Yeshua. Fellas, if you have a piece of clay and you hollow it out, you could put a peri in there. You could put anything solid in there. Now, you can't put a liquid in because the liquid is poor. It'll get absorbed. What the kiln does, it closes the pores, so you're able to go ahead and put a liquid in. So the Gemara is saying, how do you know that le'inyan ner, that it's considered gemar malacha? Bishlema, when it's for a large object, such as solid, then it's okay. It makes sense why it can be considered a kli already. Aval hacha l'may chazya. What can you possibly use it for now? Guys, you want to make a lamp. You didn't go ahead and put it in the kiln. What can you put in there that it considered as a base kibble that it's Gemar Malacha? You can't tell me oil. Oil is going to go ahead and get absorbed right away. And for the Gemara, the coins. Right now, you could put coins in there. Since you could put coins in there, it's considered a kli, and it's Gemar Malacha, and therefore our Mishnah would be according to Rabbi Meir. Ikad Yami others say, Amar Rabbi Yosef Bar Elazar, Amar Rabbi Yosef Kama, Rabbi Eliezer Bar Tzadiki. A Mishnah that says just hollowing it out before pulling it into the kiln is the Tana Rabbi Eliezer Bar Tzadik. That nan ilfasin cherniyos, ilfasin plates of the boondocks. We'll see in a second. These it seems the Gemara is going to say it, but it seems in the boondocks the people were not such fine to mention. You would flatten out a piece of a plate, and you would go ahead and they would eat. They didn't eat it in the kiln. They didn't even eat it with a base kibble. They would go ahead and use it. So tahiris boil mace, since it doesn't have a base kibble, it's tar boil mace. We learn out tire of a simit seal. We learn out from a klicheres that has a base kibble. That when it's summit seal, it's saved. When it's not summit seal, it's not. So it has a receptacle area. So obviously this doesn't have a receptacle area. These boonback plates and memela, it's tahar tumas mace oil. The tumas b'masa azav. But when it comes to zav, which is tumas hesed, we said a zav is a chiddush. If a zav moves a klicheres, even if it doesn't have a base kibble, it would be metama according to Rashi. After high-res b'masa azav, it still be tire masa azav. Vishloi nigma malachtan. It says having a gemar malacha. So l'chayra, if you look at Rashi, four lines up from the bottom, vishloi nigma malachta. Chakikasan, the gemar malacha is its chakika. That right? Ha nechakaku metumis. Chikasa ha nechakaku metamois. If you did go ahead and make an indentation, it would be tamei. Fellas, by this plate, the reason why the plate is not tamei, according to Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzadik, is there's no base kibble. If you would make a base kibble, it would be. That's our Mishnah. You went ahead and you made a base kibble by indenting the ner. So therefore, he's the Tana of our Mishnah. Again, one more time. The reason it's tar completely over here is because you didn't make a chakika. You didn't engrave, you didn't hollow out anything. Mashma, the implication, had you hollowed out, even though you didn't put it in the kiln. Again, you just hollowed out. You didn't put it in the kiln, it would do the job, which is our Mishnah, right? So therefore, it's geschmack, but you needed Rashi to say that. One more time. So it says, Ad kan lekom Rebbe Lezer, meaning it didn't have a base kibble. Mashman had a base kibble, even though you didn't get to step number 3, putting in the kiln, it would be tamei, which is our Mishnah. There, you could be makabel food. What can be makabel? What says same teretz pshiti? You can go ahead makabel pshiti. You can makabel coins. So again, you could say the Mishnah is either contributed yes, tzaddik or contributed meya. Tanrabanan. Ein poichasin es haner. You can't go ahead and hollow out a ner. Again, you have a piece of earthenware to use for a lamp. Vein oisin elfisin charanios beyontif, and you can't make these plates charanios and yontif. Rishim gamliel mateh bil fasin charanios. You could. My charanios. Amar Rav Yehuda aranios. My aranios. Amar Rabaya say chakol yasa. These are plates of the villages. Plates of the villages. Again, that it seems that the people were very plain over there. Okay, now the second in the Mishnah was you can't make pechamim because it's going to be the kli of a coppersmith. It says pshita l'may chazi. What else could you use it for? What could you use it for? So Tana Rabbi Chia le'nitzcha elu le'moisron le'laryin. In other words, there's two. The word's kasha is like this, fellas. Forget about a kli. Even without a kli, it's shaloi l'tzayrich. Guys, look at me, please. We know the malacha on Yom Tif is only if it has a tzayrich, right? It has a need. If it doesn't have a need for eichel nefesh, then you can't go and use it. Rashi said in the Mishnah, p'chamim, the reason you can't make a charcoal is because you're making a kli. Fred the Gemara, even without that reason, I'm reading between the lines, even without that reason, why should you be able to make it? There's no tzayrich behind it. There's no purpose behind it. So the Gemara answers there is a purpose behind it, and since there's a purpose behind it, you had to come on to the reason of what? That it's a kli, because without that you would be able to make it. Now, what's the purpose of pcham, and what could you use charcoal for? Says the Gemara. So Fred the Gemara kasha, lemay chazi, what can you possibly use it for? And for the Gemara, Rabbi Chia ben Elazar, giving it over to the laundromat guy, the guys in the, not the laundromat, in the bathhouse, a schwitz. In other words, you can use the charcoal to heat the water in the schwitz. That's litzayrich. So therefore, you should be able to do it, if not for the fact that goldsmith used it as a kli. Since a goldsmith used it as a kli, you can't use it. Al stat sad, but al litzayrich, there's a tzayrich. What? Heating bathhouse water. Fred the Gemara. Are you allowed to go ahead into a schwitz on Yontif? And for Gemara, to go ahead and schwitz before the gezerah of the bathhouse attendants. Remember, Masechta Shabbos, they made a gezerah. These guys weren't trustworthy. We think they can go ahead and heat up the stuff on Shabbos, so we made a gezerah. So before this gezerah, it had a purpose, and therefore, if not for the reason, the fact that you're making a kli that goldsmith can use it, you would be able to go ahead and use pacham on Shabbos on Yontif. So that's the reason. So we have two dinim in the Mishnah. The first din in parchsin as aner, even though you didn't put it in the kiln, either according to Rabbi Meir, according to Tzaddik. The second din of ve'einois pachamim b'yontif. Why? Because goldsmith used it. Fred the Gemara. Why do you have to come into that reasoning? It's shalai the tzorich, and for the Gemara, before the gezerah of bathhouse attendants, you could go ahead and take a schwitz, and therefore it could be used for that. If not for the fact that what you're making a kli for goldsmith. The final din, you can't go ahead and cut a psila lishnayim into two. Again, it doesn't. It says it doesn't. The Mishnah doesn't say shnayim, guys. It says two. The Bryce says it's two. Why not amid base? Why not besakin not? The kometakin mana. Now, where's the tikkun mana? Says Rashi. Achas hoisa. It was one. And you're making two. When you cut it, guys, you made a second kli. When you cut it, you made a second kli. Since you made a second kli, that's tikkun mana. You create number one in tikkun mana. You created a mana, so that you can't do. Now the question is, why could you use? Yehuda said if you light a flame, you could. What's the difference? If you're making into two things, it's also a problem, right? Says the Gemara, Tani Reb Chia, you could cut it within fire. In two neres, right? That's pshat. If you have two lamps, one over here, one over here, and you put a wick in here and a wick in there, when you light it, it doesn't seem like you're making two. It seems like you're lighting what? Two lamps. You light a lamp on Yontif. So that's the difference between cutting, where clearly you're making two, and over here where you're lighting, it seems like you're lighting the licht. Okay. Again, this is Din Rabbanan, guys. So Din Rabbanan, they can play with it, even though at the end of the day you have two wicks, right? Bottom line is, by lighting it, it doesn't appear you have two wicks. It appears you're just lighting. Amar Rav Nasir bar Abba, Amar Rav, moichtin es hapsila b'yontif. You can be moichet the psila yontif. My moichtin, Amar Rav Chinina bar Shalmei mishmei de. I guess they take it out. La'aduye choshcha. To go ahead and remove the darkness. We had this earlier, guys, on Daf Yomi Beitzah. I spoke out on Hanukkah. If you light with cotton, you get this black, like little krech on the side. And if you take it, it comes brighter again. You take it off. That's what we're speaking about now. We're speaking about taking off that black, la'adu yechushka, to remove the darkness. That's what you can. That's what moichten means. You're able to go ahead and remove the dark from the side over there. Now, there's two types of moichten. There was on Chav Beis. I didn't do this taisvis. I implied it taisvis. Rashi says you can trim, but if you look at Chav Beis Amid Aleph, the fourth taisvis down is kinba, and he says in the middle of the taisvis the chen nira, the trei chatuchi yesh. There are two types of moichten. Echad b'shas shedoilik, one when it's lit. V'hainu alhu de l'kanmon, that's the one we just discussed. And by going ahead and removing that part, it becomes what? Clearer. V'yesh echad la'achas shekava, after it went out, to go ahead and trim it, that it should go ahead and light better the next time. So there's two types. There's one, when it's lit, we're discussing over here, to make the light brighter, to remove the darkness. And the other one there is when it went out. By removing the stuff from the side, it's going to be light quicker the next time you use it. So that's two types of moichta. Back in the Gemara Vayos, Tani Bakapara. Vav Devarim Nemru Psila. There are three halachas we say regarding Psila. Gimel Lahachmir, 3 are Lachumis, the Gimel Lahakel, and 3 wad are Lahakel, and 3 are Kulas. Lahachmir, in Goydin Mesolachatchila, you can't twist the wick. The Yomtiv, you can't go ahead and singe it that it should light better. You can't cut it into 2. It's tikkun mana. Lahakel, one of the 3 dins that we make. Memacha biyad, you can go ahead and before you light it, you can push down the cotton on the side to make it smooth. V'shoyra b'shemen, you can go ahead and soak it in oil. V'choitcha ba'or, and you can cut it mifnei shnei neros. You can go ahead, as we said, and light it between the 2 lamps. You can light it. So since we brought in the Amoira of Nasan Bar Abba, the Gemara brings in further sayings of Nasan Bar Abba that have nothing to do with Masechta Beitzah, which is just a very, very nice digression. Amrav Nasan Bar Abba, Amrav Asiri Bavel Yordei Gehenim Heim. The rich people of Bavel are Yordei Gehenim. They go to, where? Ki hodish Shabtoi Bar Marenis. Shabtoi Bar Marenis, Ikla le Bavel. He came to Bavel. Boy Minayu, he asked from them Iska. In other words, he wanted to make some money. He said, give me your prop. You give me a sphira, I'll sell it, and we'll split the profits. And Iska, business deal. He needed money. They didn't give it to him. Mizoine, he wanted food. Mason Namilos, he knew it. They didn't give him food. Omar, Hani me'erev Rav Kasi, said Shabsoi Bamrenis, these people in Babel must be descendants of the Erev Rav and not Avram Avinu. Dichsiv, v'nosancha rachmim v'richamcha. And he'll give to you rachmim, and you'll have rachmanis. Kol rachim alabriyas b'yeduah shumizar shel Avram Avinu. It's kind of funny where you see that from those words, v'nosancha rachmim v'richamcha. So the pasuk under discussion, guys, over here is speaking about Erni Dachas. By Erni Dachas, if you hear that a city is going to go ahead and it's doing here, Roiv of the inhabitants are doing Avodah Zarah, there's a mitzvah to destroy the city by the sword and burn all the belongings in the city. Now it says in the Perek Yigimel Pasuk Yud Ches, it says, it should not be in your hands anything. In order that Hashem returns from his anger, and he'll give you rachmanis. In other words, don't be worried that the midah of murder will become part of you. You'll still be merachim. And now it says at the end, like he swore to your father. That's the end of the pasuk. Guys, look at Rashi. You'll have rachmanis on the briyos. And look at Rashi. Rashi says something that our Gemara doesn't have. Rashi says, and anyone who has rachmim is in the zera of Avram. It's the last part of that pasuk that the Gemara doesn't bring in, that the raya is from. Rashi had that girsa. And like he swore to your fathers that you'll have rachmanis. In other words, that's the raya. In other words, if you have rachmanis, you're like a ben Avram. Many times the difference, the Gemara in Yevamah says, if you see a person who is exceedingly cruel, check into his yichus. Maybe he's not what from the Zer of Avram. Maybe he's not from the Zer of Avram. It's an amazing thing. I spoke on Friday in my school, and I spoke, we said, Bereshis, B'shvil Yisrael Shnikar Reshis, Boral Kemes Shemaim V'Sa'aretz. And I said, so you think it's racist that we're the purpose of creation, Bereshis, B'shvil Yisrael Shnikar Reshis, Boral Kemes Shemaim V'Sa'aretz. That's Rashi, first Rashi in the Torah. And that's what he does. So it's a fascinating that I said the fact that you are who you are, you have to live up to it. It doesn't come automatically. So I read to them, Yosef Gladstein gave me a book. Yosef Gladstein's father died at 105 years old. He lived in Pittsburgh. He was a Rav for 70 years. And he was in Auschwitz. Listen to this excerpt. In 1945, the Nazis had to make an important decision. The American and Russian armies were fast approaching, and the Germans could either focus their resources at the front to try to win the war, or they could dedicate their capabilities to exterminate whatever Jews were still left in Europe. They chose the latter. So they rounded up whatever Jews were left in the camps, my grandfather included, and they packed them like animals onto cattle cars without food or drink. Where they were headed to the Tyrol Mountains to dig their own graves. With the help of the Almighty, the American Army discovered their plan. Under the direction of General Henning Linden Jr., the United States Air Force bombed the railroad tracks, thwarting the plan of the Rishayim. When the SS officers realized that the end was near, they quickly exchanged uniforms with the Jewish inmates. But when the American Army arrived, the soldiers were not duped by the scheme. The Jewish prisoners were skeletons, walking cadavers, while the German officers were fat and robust. An American officer approached my grandfather, handed him his pistol, and said, "Rabbi, here, take the gun. The world press is not here yet. Now is your opportunity to take revenge against the enemy." To which my grandfather responded, "Revenge? It has been 5 years since I've been able to look into my Gemara. I was in the middle of Masechta Bava Basra. I'll now be reunited with my Gemara. That's all I need. I leave revenge to the Rabbi Shalom." That's the difference. That's the difference. I think it's poignant, very poignant, very poignant point. Okay, anyway, back in the Gemara. Anyone looks at other people, looks for food at other people. The world's dark for him. He's noided, he's moving for bread. Yom Choshech is like day of darkness. He doesn't have a life. You're always looking at other people, he doesn't have a life. 3 people, his life is not a life. Someone looks at the shulchan of his chaver. Someone who's his wife rules over him. And if he has Isurim Begufay, those are 3 people who have no life. He only one shirt. The Tanakama Efshad the Miyayim B'mana, he doesn't include that the 4th one because it's probably to go ahead. You could look at your shirt to check for lice. Okay, now you'd have a fish. You have a salted fish. You want to broil the fish. You can't put it on the griddle because it's going to get burnt. So they either have paper or a piece of cheres, and they would burn. They would cook the fish on top of they would griddle, which was a piece of cheres on top. You can't do that. You can't do that on Yontif. Then gorfin tano b'karayim, and you can't if you have. They had a tano karayim. They had these ovens. They would put bread on the walls of the ovens. Let's say the insulation, the tiach of the oven fell in, right? You can't go ahead and take it out. That's only if it can't cook. It could cook. If it can't cook, you're able to take it out. Halacha is we could take out anything from our ovens because we use the bottom of the oven. We don't use the walls. So we have ashes in your oven or something, or it's dirty, it's schmutz, you can go ahead and take it out. Al machapshin, you can go ahead and level it off, press it, okay, on the oven. You can't take 2 barrels to put together and put the gedera on top of them. Again, this is all the choil or barrels. You can't be samech or kedera on a stick, nor on a door, which is very funny. You're not going to use a door to cook. We're going to see what it means. If you can't lead an animal, he mated, go ahead in this case. Okay, let's see the Gemara. My timer. What's the reason that you can't go ahead and use a kalim? You can't break kalim to go ahead and cook fish. It says the Gemara, become a takin mana. Because you make it all depends. So you're making a kli. That kli is cooking the fish in. Then Garfin Tanav Karayim, Tani Rabbi about Yosef Kameder Rav Nachman. Then the Shalaf, if it's not possible, as I mentioned in the Mishnah, to use to cook, bake, then you could. Elam Garfoy, then mutter. Then it's mutter to go ahead. The wife of Rabbi a brick fell into her oven. The Yom Tov on Yontif. Amallah Rabbi Chazi da'ano rifta ma'aya sabina. See that I need good bread. Like Rabbi Yosef we had the other day. See that I have good bread. In other words, take it out of the oven. The oven won't be able to cook well with this brick in the middle. You can take it out. Amalei Rabbi Lashami. Tavli bar avza. Go ahead and broil for me a goose. Va'ozda mecharucha. Be careful that was daher mecharucha that doesn't get singed. In other words, if you have this material in the middle of the oven that gets very hot, and you're broiling this duck, and the duck is going to get attached to this piece, it's going to get burnt. So be careful. So meaning, he's saying the same thing. Be careful. You could take it out. Amar Ravina Ravashi, Amar Lanu Rav Acha, Mehutzel, Demar, Sharkin Le Tanura B'Yumatava, you go ahead and your tanner, you take mud and you cover the pores to keep the heat in on Yantif. Amalei, Ana Araksa de Parasamkinan. In other words, to take mud and make mud, that's a told of lush, of kneading. But on the Raksa and the Hara, it already was there before. You had liquid clay. So if you misdominate it before Yantif, that you never muktzah problem, there's no problem. Honey Mili, who the Sayora Mietmol, you mitzay which one you're going to use the yesterday, so there's not a muktzah problem. Ravina the kitma shari, to go ahead and use kitma, to use ish would be permitted. Okay. Thank you all for listening. I've got the vach to all.